Good afternoon. On behalf of the Indiana Arts Commission, I'd like to welcome you to the FY24 Arts Project Support Workshop presented by our regional arts partners. I'm Ann McKim, Executive Director of the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana down here in Evansville, and Chair of the Regional Arts Partnership, which my colleague Kayla Myers will share more information on shortly. The Arts Project Support Program has been utilized by the state of Indiana to disperse funds for nearly 50 years. Arts Project Support, or APS, differs from its sister program, Arts Organization Support, in that APS is open to nonprofits, units of government, and schools to support a specific project, such as a one-time event, a single production, an exhibition, a workshop, or a series of related arts activities. Whereas Arts Organization Support is open only to arts nonprofits for general organizations and arts programming. We're glad you're here. And now I invite Kayla Myers, our partner from Region 2, to get you started.
Thanks so much, Ann. For some general housekeeping announcements, we are recording today's webinar, which will be emailed to you in the next few days. We ask that all participants please mute themselves throughout the presentation, and questions can be typed into the chat box. We will link a PDF of the grant application in the chat if you'd like to follow along later in the presentation. We will also allow a few minutes for questions at the end. If you need accommodations for the grant guidelines or the online application, please contact the IAC's Accessibility Coordinator, Stephanie Haynes, as shown on the screen. Live captioning is being offered during this webinar. You can turn on your captions in the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. If you need help with captions or any accessibility during this webinar, please send a private chat to Connie Brom. So based on the population, the IAC has divided our state into 11 different regions. These workshops were previously held at the regional level, but the pandemic provided an opportunity to work together more in recent years. At the end of the presentation, we'll provide contact information for all of the regional arts partners so you can identify yours if you are not familiar. As Ann noted, I'm the partner for Region 2, and additional partners joining me today are Dave Micah from Region 1, Ryan Shelton from Region 7, and Ann McKim from Region 10. Deanna Polsma will also be presenting the IAC's online grant system. So for the agenda today, we will be covering information about the FY24 Arts Project Support Grant Program. Specifically, we will cover the program summary and timeline, evaluation process, application information and evaluation criteria. Then we'll also view the online grant application and go through some grant writing tips, and we'll finish up with grant recognition and advocacy information, and then allow some time for questions. So Arts Project Support, or APS grants, provide funding to Indiana 501c3 nonprofit organizations and public entities to support a specific arts project or arts activities. Some examples of eligible projects include a one-time event, a single performance, an exhibition, an educational workshop, or series of related arts activities, such as art classes or training sessions that are open to the public, whether free or for a fee. And this program provides grant awards of up to $5,000. So for the FY24 timeline, the funding period is for projects happening between the dates of July 1st, 23 and June 30th of 24. The deadline to request a draft application review from your regional arts partner is February 23rd. And please note that priority for draft reviews will be given to first-time applicants. The application is due March 9th, 23 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. We, of course, suggest you submit a few days early in case you have questions. The public panel reviews will be taking place between April 20th and May 4th of 23. And your organization will be notified prior to panels with your specific panel date and time. And then the award notifications will go out through the IAC's online system June 12th of 23. If your project is funded, grant agreements will be processed between July and September. The first payment, which is 75% of the award, is typically deposited in October. The year one grant report will be due July 13th of 24, and then the final 25% of the award is typically deposited between August and September of 24. And this is after your year one grant report is submitted and reviewed. So if you are awarded funding, we wanted to highlight a few requirements that your organization will need to follow with the fund being awarded through the state. So the payments must be made by direct deposit, and your organization must follow the ADA and federal civil rights requirements, monitor record retention and tax responsibilities, and ensure grant funds are used for eligible expenses only. The full requirements are outlined in the guidelines and grant agreements. So moving on to the evaluation process, applications will be scored on a 100-point scale. The scores will be utilized as part of a funding formula that determines the allocation of grant awards. Applications must receive a total score of 75 or higher to be considered for funding, and information submitted in the application will be reviewed according to the following criteria. So artistic quality for 20 points, artist benefit, which is 10 points, community engagement is 20 points, IDEA or inclusion, diversity, equity, and access for 20 points, and then project management for 30 points. And the above criteria have sub-bullet points within the application as well. And I'm now going to turn it over to Dave Micah to share more about the application.
Hey, thanks, Kayla. Very much appreciate it. And as Kayla shared, I am Dave Micah. I'm Executive Director for South Shore Arts here in Munster, Indiana, Regional Arts Partner for Region 1. And my role today really is to highlight and walk you through Sections 2 and Sections 3 of the 2024 Arts Project Support Grant application, which, if you noted in the chat, there's a link to that. You can follow along there if it helps in your as you look to your future completion of that application. So if we start in Section 2 specifically, this section is very straightforward. It just provides the basic information about your organization and your project. So simple, just a series of simple yes/no questions, short answers for your organization to complete relative to your 501c3 status, your grantee history, if you've received IAC Arts Project Support grants previously, a brief description of your project and the artistic discipline that you'll be practicing, start and end dates, etc. So very basic information about what it is you'll be delivering. It should also be noted that applicants for Arts Project Support grants do not need to be 501c3 organizations themselves. Might be that, you've got to act like, to a certain extent, to qualify for an APS grant, you have to act like a not-for-profit meaning you aren't in it for a profit. You're there to deliver a quality experience to your community but you haven't gone through the motions of actually completing the required work to get your 501c3 status. And if that applies to your organization, as long as you have a 501c3 fiscal sponsor out there, a not-for-profit organization that has agreed to sponsor your arts project, you still can apply for APS grant funding. That agreement with your fiscal sponsor must be documented in a memorandum of understanding between yourself as the applicant and the 501c3 organization that is sponsoring you. And if you're not sure what that is or what that looks like, there is actually a link for more details right in the APS application preview on the Indiana Arts Commission grant webpage. So it can walk you through step by step exactly what you need in those cases. But it really does make these grants much more widely available by allowing non-501c3 organizations to participate. So Section 2 is also just a section where your income and expense statement for your organization needs to be uploaded, unless you're a university or a public entity there. So it's your organization, and it's strictly your revenue and income expense for the year. And if you are an organization that has a 501c3 501c3 fiscal sponsor, the information to be uploaded is your fiscal sponsor's information. And just one final note in section 2, just for your information, this is strictly for the IAC administration, part of the grant process. None of this information, including the revenue and income statement, revenue and expense statement, is reviewed by the panelists that score your grant. It has no bearing on that score. Okay. So that's section 2, just yes, no questions and upload your income and expense statement. Section 3 really applies to your APS application certifying accessibility. And as a public funder, accessibility is important at all times for the IAC, and the Arts Commission needs to validate that all funded organizations meet all ADA and Section 504 accessibility requirements. There are a few key steps in this area. So one is you've got to certify that your organization is accessible, or that you're able to make accommodations upon request. Okay, so that's question 1. Question 2 is really a narrative box that you've got to complete to say if someone, a participant or an attendee, would like an accommodation from your organization, how would you handle that? How would they make the request? And then question 2 is how would they make the request to you? Question 3 then is how will you as an organization review the accessibility of the programs out there to make sure they're accessible, or if an accommodation is needed, how you'll provide the accommodation there. And so again, the Indiana Arts Commission provides links in the application to a simple self-assessment checklist that you can use. And it's a terrific tool for assessing not only for your grant application, but even for your organization's future planning on accessibility. There's also a terrific frequently asked questions section on accessibility to help you guide you through your assessment if you need it. And again, it's just a great tool, not only for this grant project, but for you to look at how you provide accessibility to all your potential patrons in the future. From your answers on questions 1, 2, and 3 of section 3, it will lead you to some final details that you'll need to provide regarding accessibility. And know that any information that you use to document your accessibility, like the self-check, self-assessment, et cetera, does need to be retained and be available for review for a period of 3 years. So it's something you can't just complete it and then throw it away. Definitely hold on to that, because if anything comes up, we want to come back and validate how you assess that you have that information available. Again, just note that this information on the accessibility section 3 is only for review by IAC administrators, not to the panelists. And note that if you do have questions on this area, in addition to the frequently asked questions area, we also have a terrific accessibility coordinator, Stephanie Haynes with the IAC, who's available to help guide you through that program as well, in addition to your regional arts partners. So with that, we've covered those 2 sections. Let me turn it over to Ryan Shelton from Region 7 to move on with some of the scoring. So Ryan, over to you.
Thanks, Dave. Now we'll take a look at the rubric that panelists will use to score your application. There are 100 points possible, with a minimum score of 75 necessary for funding. A written list of these criteria can be found in the evaluation criteria PDF on the IAC's website, as well as clicking on the links within the application itself. The criteria sheets align directly with the application questions, which should make reviewing your application easier. Section 4 of the application looks at artistic quality, worth 20 points, and artist benefit, worth 10 points. Artist quality is relative to the budget size of the organization. This relates to the idea that smaller organizations cannot necessarily provide the same services or opportunities in comparison to larger organizations. We're going to talk a little bit more about artistic quality, what that means. This is an artistic project. Goals are clear. Tell why you are doing this project in your community. If this project has been done before, the applicant utilizes past experience to inform this year's project, and that's worth 10 points. The project description and artistic documentation demonstrate the project will provide the audience a meaningful, impactful, and quality, artistic, or authentic experience. Use your passion to tell your story and be thorough and detailed, and that's worth 10 points. We're going to talk about artist benefit. Artist benefit relates to how your project will directly financially benefit and or support the work of Indiana artists. An Indiana artist is defined as the artists that are living and working in the state of Indiana, and that's worth 10 points. Often panelists focus on how artists receive monetary compensation or monetary support for their work. As an example, a well-received fiscal year 23 application focused on the qualifications of Indiana-based artists involved in a visual arts workshop and how the project would pay them for their expertise. It also showed the organizer's passion for the event and gave specific details on how the event would be run and the impact it would have on the community. With the application, you'll need to include a narrative about your project. Be specific. The panelists may know nothing about your area or your event. You also need to include specific numbers and dollars that relate to artists, as well as documentation in the form of documents or websites that show the quality of the artists involved. Now I'll turn it over to Ann to cover community engagement and IDEA.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, the next section of the application addresses community engagement and IDEA plans. Each of these two areas is worth 20 points of the evaluation. Here, the IAC is asking for information on the extent to which there is an active two-way ongoing relationship between the applicant and the community in planning, participation, and evaluation of the proposed activities, which includes intentional strategies for inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, or IDEA. This section of the application will be evaluated based on the extent to which, 1, underserved communities will benefit, 2, the project is developed with, not for, the identified communities it will serve. It should be clear that the community is in an ongoing part of the project. 3, the project includes IDEA strategies to increase access, address barriers, diversify participants, or provide accessibility accommodations for underserved communities. 4, the applicant has a clear process for measuring the project's impact. And 5, the marketing materials and social media web presence reflect those they seek to serve, and projected participation figures seem reasonable. I encourage all applicants, even those who feel confident in their awareness and understanding of community engagement and IDEA principles and practices, to spend time reviewing the definitions and information provided as links within the application materials itself. The IAC also has pages on their website with information on these topics. The Commission is committed to community engagement and inclusion, diversity, equity, and access in the arts. And this is an area of the application that you'll want to take your time on. Excuse me. The narrative box for this question asks for information on the communities that you will serve, how their input will be included in the development and planning of the project, the IDEA strategies and initiatives that will be used, and the tools and methods that will be utilized to measure the project's impact. Successful applicants will have read the narrative prompt carefully and address each item fully. I'll illustrate the community engagement and IDEA efforts with an example from my organization, the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana. In 2022, we asked staff members from an early childhood-focused organization called Building Blocks to walk through our facility and share ideas about becoming more child-friendly and welcoming. We had identified families as young children as a group experiencing both real and perceived barriers in accessing our programs. The initial walkthrough led to more conversations and ideas. And with Building Blocks as a 50% collaborator, the Arts Council developed Early Childhood Creative Exploration Days, a program that occurred over the summer. For each session, we transformed the gallery by lowering all of the work on the walls several feet to toddler eye level and filled the space with art supplies, instruments, and other items for child-led play. Building Blocks created standard-based materials to help educate caregivers on the educational and developmental benefits of arts activities. Each event was promoted through both organizations in order to reach both audiences. All of the Arts Council planning documents were organized in such a way that Building Blocks is able to hand the fully packaged program to partners in other communities to replicate. Data was collected via participant feedback story, and plans are in the works for continuation of the program. The best part, participating families began to attend other Arts Council programming in the gallery because the Creative Exploration Days sessions provided the access point that was needed to invite them in. In terms of the community engagement and idea narrative, I've just very briefly explained how the underserved community, which in this case was families with young children, benefited from the experience, how the project was developed with an organization focused on and representing that community, how barriers were addressed and accessibility accommodations were made, and how impact was measured, and how our marketing strategy was designed to reach our intended audience. The next section of the budget, of the application, section 6, covers project management and budget and is worth 30 points of the evaluation. Why so many points in this section? This is where the panelists evaluate the likelihood that your project is going to do what you say it's going to do. Panelists will score the extent to which you demonstrate the ability to successfully design and implement the program through effective planning, financial management, staffing, and evaluation. This section will be evaluated on the extent to which there's staffing to carry out the project and the lead staff is appropriately experienced for the project. There's appropriate planning process and timeline. And the financial statement demonstrates capacity to implement the project, and the project budget is well considered and reasonable. So you have wonderful program staff and volunteers. This is where you explain their roles and their qualifications. You have a well thought out timeline. This is where you explain the process from start to finish. In addition to a staffing overview, be sure to include the title, role, responsibilities, and relevant experience of the lead project manager. It's okay if you don't have a staff person doing in charge of these things. If you're working through a committee or a lead volunteer, be sure to mention their credentials as well. Also, be sure that your timeline includes your community engagement strategies. If you're going to have a focus group or engage with stakeholders, make sure you show when you are going to do this within your planning process. Please note that while the panelists are evaluating your organization based on this section, it's okay if you have to reschedule or shift things around. We realize that timelines can change slightly. The budget section is a common EEC for grant writers, myself included, but I don't want you to be intimidated here. We're asking you to just follow the instructions and provide your information with clarity. Be sure to provide a balanced budget where the income and the expenses match, and that the income and expenses listed are related only to the project during the grant period. Please use the links in the application to ensure that you are requesting funds for eligible expenses. As an example, an example of the desired format is provided in the application. And after reading through all of it and clicking on all the links, if you're still feeling eek about budget, please reach out to your regional arts partners. We're here to help. Now I'd like to introduce Deanna Polsma to review the online grant system and take a look at the actual application.
Awesome, thanks, Anne. So as Anne mentioned, my name is Deanna Polsma. I've put my contact information in the chat for you guys, and I'm going to be sharing my screen to walk through the online system with you all. So if you have any technical questions, issues with your application and the online system, you can contact me. Or you can also contact Suzette. She is listed here on this main login page. It has her name and email. So if you can't reach myself, you can also reach out to Suzette. So the first thing I want to go over about the online system is that if you say are new to your organization and you're not sure if you already have an existing account, please, please, please reach out to myself or to Suzette. We can take a look through all of the organizations in the system and let you know if it's just a matter of updating some contact information and getting you access to log in, or if you do indeed need to create a brand new account. So if you do need to create a new account, there's just this little gray button you'll click. A few things you'll need to have on hand are going to be things like your organization name, mailing address, EIN number, congressional districts, what region number you're in. And if you're not sure of any of that information, there are links within the registration profile to help you sort those things out. But to be aware, there is information that you're going to want to have handy as you get ready to build an account if you are a brand new applicant. If you've had a change of staff and you just need access, again, it's a simple matter of just updating a contact in the online system. You don't have to go in and create a whole new profile. So just let us know. Once you log in, it's going to take you immediately to your dashboard. If you are, again, joining an organization who has an existing profile, you'll want to review the information up here at the top. You want to make sure that the organization name is spelled correctly, the mailing address is correct, the primary contact listed is correct. This is all information that is going to be used when building the grant contracts with the state. So you want to make sure that everything here is correct and up to date. If not, you can just click these fancy little pencil icons and edit the information to your heart's desire. You'll notice below there are two tabs. You have an active request tab and a historical request. So if you've submitted applications in the past that are not currently ongoing, they're going to appear under historical requests, and you can go and review the applications that were submitted, final grant reports that were submitted, things of that nature. And then anything that you may have started working on or submitted in the past, but they've not determined if it's been approved or not, is all going to be under active requests. Or if you're still pending a final report submission, all of that's going to be here under the active request button. To begin your application, you're going to come up to this gray bar. There is an apply button that you will click, and this will bring you to a page with all of the open grant applications. So you're going to want to make sure you scroll down to the arts project support, not the arts organization support, arts project support, and click the blue apply button. You also have the ability to preview an application down here if you'd like, but we're going to click blue to apply. And once you are in the system, there's a couple things to note. So the system will automatically save as you type into any of the user fields. There is also all the way at the bottom a gray save application button. The blue is the submit if you're ready. So if you want to, if you're just like, I don't trust technology, I want to make sure it's saved, I worked for hours on this thing, you can always scroll down to the bottom and submit. But if you begin typing in a box, you'll notice as soon as I click out, it turns green, and that indicates the system has saved what I have just typed into that box. If you have submitted an arts project support application in the past, and you think that a lot of the content that you submitted in the past is going to be relevant to your current application, up here at the very top, you have the ability to copy previous answers. So if you click this button, it'll show all your past applications, and you can select which application you want to pull forward your responses to the same questions from previous years. If questions are new, obviously there's no information to pull, and you will have some blank boxes, but it gives you a good starting point if you have a lot of redundant information. You also have the ability to collaborate. So let's say you've spent a lot of time on this, you're the only one in your organization, but you want a second pair of eyes. You can click this collaborate button, type in someone's email, and send it to them. That way they can then click a link and look at it and just get back to you and let you know, hey, this was misspelled, or maybe rework this here, or you forgot this. If you happen to have others in your organization, you also have the ability to select people that are listed on the account in your organization and give them the ability to not only read, but also to edit and submit. So there's a couple functionalities if you have multiple people from your organization listed on the founding account. If you want someone else to be the final say so and push the final submit button, but you get it started, that is an option as well. If you're just like, I don't do well on computers, I prefer to have things printed out in front of me, there is a gray PDF question list button here. If you click on this, it will generate a PDF version of the application, which you can then print. If you would prefer to work manually, you have that option as well. You'll have to come back into the system to enter your responses, but if you feel better just reading through things on paper and working things out there first, that is an option for you. So as I mentioned, when you work on things, the system saves. You do not have to do it all at once. So if you were to go back home to your dashboard, you'll now notice here in my active requests, it shows my arts project support draft application. So if I left and came back the following week to work on it, I just come here, log in to my dashboard, and I would click edit application. I no longer have to go to that apply page. I can go straight into where I left off in my application. You also have the option as you're going through to condense sections by clicking these little gray bars. That way you can concentrate on working on one section at a time instead of having things open and just kind of being overwhelming all at once. I would also like to call attention to uploads within the online system. You can only upload one document. So if you are, for example, submitting some financials and they're spread across 2 or 3 documents, be sure to combine them into a single document to then upload. If you try and upload multiples, it's just going to replace what you previously submitted. If you're typing into your community engagement narrative and it's getting kind of long and you're like, man, I can't see what I'm writing here, over in the bottom right-hand corner, you do have the ability to drag and open up that box. So that way you can read everything all at one time. That way you're not having to scroll back and forth to try and say, did I include that? Did I not include it? You do have the ability to make those larger and smaller if you would like. Let's see. Just going through my notes, making sure I'm not missing anything else here. All right. So we went over, yep, nope, that is everything for the online system that I have for you guys. So if you have any questions or run into any other issues, feel free to reach out to myself or to Suzette, and we are happy to help. And over to you, Ryan.
Thank you. Let me just, that popped up for a second. I'm going to quickly touch base on some tips for grant writing. Do not hesitate to reach out to your regional arts partner with any questions. The earlier questions are sent, the easier it is for RAPs to find solutions. If you are a first-time applicant, we highly recommend requesting a grant review. Requests must be made by February 23rd and will be responded to in the order they are received, so get them in quickly. Basically, you'll just email your RAP that you have it all finished and ready for us to review and look it over. We recommend reading the entire application before starting it. Make sure you tell the full story, provide examples, and assume that panelists have no familiarity with your organization. Be concise, but provide enough detail to fully answer the question and address the criteria. Longer does not mean stronger. Do not hesitate to show your passion for your project and its reach into the community. And then keep in mind the character counts in each response box because they can get filled up. And finally, be sure to have your application edited and revised by others in your organization, or even better, someone willing to help outside your organization. Talk briefly about grant recognition and advocacy. If you are funded, here are some key elements to remember. You'll need to provide funding credit on promotional materials and let your audience know about government support for cultural experiences. For example, at an in-person event, you would say activities are made possible in part by the Indiana Arts Commission. And finally, continue inviting legislators to your events, whether virtual or in person. If you have questions about providing credit, you can refer to the IAC's website or reach out directly to Connie Brahm, IAC's Marketing and Communications Director. And before we move on to Q&A, I just want to share our information so you'll know who to reach out to. This information is also in the APS guidelines and the IAC website. All right, Anne, I think we're ready for questions.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we're happy to take questions. You can either put them in the chat box, or you can raise your hand on your Zoom box, or you can just ask it out loud. And I will read all the questions from the chat box so everyone can hear what's being asked. So the first question we have, where do we submit grants for review? So what will happen there is that you'll just contact your regional arts partner and request a review. And again, Connie has dropped that list of how to find out who your regional arts partner is in the box.
And they will make the review right in the application. The comments can be put right in there.
Great point, yes. Do we have any other questions? I'm looking for hands or questions. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Meg DeMake is from Northwest Indiana. Okay, I'm looking at about 3 or 4 local venues, but to find out if they're prepared for accessibility, what if I'm unable to reach them? To find this out when I'm making my application, as far as their accessibility. I can't hear you. Oh, okay.
Sorry, I just came on because I think that the partners are trying to discern how to respond to that. I think the key thing is that if you are funded, it's going to require that the location be ADA accessible. So you could talk about specifically what locations that you are looking to host the performance, and if it's a publicly accessible event. So if it's like a school or something like that, you'll have to work with them in some way. You'll need to be able to assure that you can make accommodations or that it will be accessible. So you'll have to reach out to them and get that.
I have to reach out to them, and they have to have things up to date before I hand in this application.
You could have them. So why don't we, I think what would be easier, honestly, is for you and I to sidebar on this, Meg, because there's a lot of elements of nuance. For example, depends on the number of locations, depends on the type of location you're looking to host, kind of where you are at in the process, and things of that nature. So why don't you go ahead and put your email address in the chat, and I will make a note of that and have either myself or Stephanie Haynes reach out directly to you.
And Meg, I would say I'm Dave Mike over at South Shore Arts.
Oh,
you and
I've spoken with you. Well, like the South Shore Arts, the South Shore Visitor and Convention Center, you know, that one's up to date.
Mm-hmm. So you and I can, I mean, we can work with Paige, and Stephanie as their accessibility coordinator would be great. And then you and I can connect offline as well.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Sarah, I see your hand up, but I'm going to move down through the questions in the chat box and then get to you. So the next question is, how large is the one document uploaded allowed to be? And that is probably a Deanna question. I don't know if there's a limit on document size through the granting platform.
Yes, so there sometimes can be multiple uploads, and there is a size limit to each upload within the application. So for example, the sample marketing material, it says right next to where you click upload file what the limit is, and in this case it's 20 MIB is what's allowed for that upload. And so if you're ever unsure, it's going to be right there next to the upload document button.
Great, thank you. Next question from Rebecca. Are there a certain number of grants earmarked for different types of arts? Love your outfit, Anne. That's obviously the most important part of the question. So no, there are not funds earmarked specifically for different types of arts. How these evaluations occur, and I always like to stress this, you're not competing against one another for to win the grant. You're competing against the criteria. We're really evaluating you based on how, and by we, I mean the panelists, how well you are meeting the criteria and executing the things that are the IAC is looking for in terms of how funds are dispersed for arts programs throughout the state. Next question. And then actually I'll let Sarah go since she's had her hand up so patiently. The timeline of the execution of a project, is this only for projects in the fall when funding is released? No, projects can occur at any point during the FY24 granting period. And we recognize that the timing of when funds are dispersed may not align exactly with when your project occurs. By that, I mean, perhaps you have a project in August and your funding is received in October. That's just the way that, and maybe Paige would like to speak to that a little bit more if I'm not doing a very clear job of explaining the fund disbursement process. But the granting period is a year-long period. funds are dispersed at a specific point during that period. Does that answer the question, or would you like more clarity? Okay, Sarah, I'm going to let you go ahead and ask a question before I hop back over to the chat.
Hi, thank you. I actually had that exact same question that was just asked, and I will go ahead and ask for slightly more clarity if somebody wanted to chime in on it, because our event is actually in July, so it would be right after, like just barely within the deadline, or the date criteria. And I guess I'm just wondering if there's any recommendation, or if this has happened for other groups. Is it typical to try and like get that funding up front from somewhere else, and then your funding comes through? Like if you get the grant funding, it comes through later. I don't know if anybody can speak to that a little bit, but I have a second question after that, but I will let this one go first.
Sure. This is Paige from the IAC. I'll chime in just a little bit on that. I think the thing is to look at is, yes, you can have your project certainly in July. We have lots of folks that have projects in July. Then you get the funding after the project has already occurred. So you will look at the IAC grant as really a reimbursement for expenses that you have already spent. You do not have to, for example, if you have a project in December, you don't have to wait to receive the funds to spend. We know that out of your budget, this much money is going to be going towards the project. So to realize that the project will occur and you submit the final report, then you get the final 25% of the award anyway. So it's really kind of a reimbursement thing. So you don't have to worry. I think the key thing that we would be concerned about is just making sure you know that you have funds to cover the expenses before the project, because also it's like at that really difficult spot where you find out you're getting funded around the end of June, and then the grant period starts July 1st. And that's really because of the way the state budget operates, because we're state government. So that's one of the reasons for that. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
So my other question is sort of related to this. So for our project specifically, it's a performance. Overall, it will cost much more than $5,000 for all of it. And so I'm wondering, in terms of budgeting, would it make sense, or would it be, would it make sense to target to specify in our application that we're really looking for $5,000 for a very specific part of the project? So for example, actually paying an honorarium or at least a fee to the performers. We have budgeted about $5,000 for that aspect of it. And so I'm wondering if that would be a smart way to go, is to kind of present everything as like, we're looking for funding for this specific part of our performance project.
Yeah, and I think that would make a competitive application as well, since so benefiting artists or supporting artists is an important ingredient for this particular program.
And I suppose, I'm sorry to go on. I can also talk to my regional arts partner about this, I'm sure. But then would it be important to include, to demonstrate the rest of the budget that we already have for the rest of the project, that we have other funding for? I don't know if that's important in demonstrating that we have the ability to do the entire project.
Yeah, this is one of those icky spots with project support, because of that timeline, and some things are kind of going over. Really, technically, you're supposed to only provide the budget specifically for the project income and expenses during the grant cycle. However, I'm all about a workaround, even though we designed this program. So you could say that that the budget is actually much larger. You could say this because the budget goes into an actual narrative box. The budget is much larger. Funding is going directly towards this portion of the project that actually is around $26,000 or something like that. However, that's outside of the grant period. Now that way the panelist gets a clear understanding of what you're doing when, and they're also assured, and we're assured, that you're spending the money and the project with which this is going to is during the grant period.
Great, thank you very much.
All great questions. Thank you so much. I'm going back over to questions in the chat. The next question, would projects such as art classes for a daycare center be disqualified due to not being available to the general public? So I have a couple of questions about your question. The first piece would be, if the daycare center is not a nonprofit, then we would have to establish who the nonprofit is that this grant is being applied under. If you're using a fiscal sponsor, and if so, then how much is your project meeting the goals outlined in the grant application? So when we talk, there's probably some nuance to actually being disqualified. It might be that you do have either nonprofit status or a fiscal agent, but then how well are you really serving the community and making it accessible and available? And it might be that the project is not disqualified, but it just would not score very well in terms of some of these categories. Paige, do you want to speak more to like if it would be totally disqualified because it's not available, or if there is some wiggle room within there?
Absolutely. And I see that she entered in the chat that it is a nonprofit organization. So yay. It could be eligible. The key ingredient here is that the added component needs to have a public component. And so the added component would be like a gallery opening at the daycare and for the families to come in and see the artwork that was created. So there's got to be some sort of a public component and that's a good thing, right? Because the kids love to show off their artwork, and certainly families always love to see the artwork. So while it would be an additional workload for you guys, it is a way for the project to be eligible for the grant funding.
Right. And I see, team, I'm getting kind of backlogged in the chat. So if you see any questions that are simple directions to information, if you wouldn't mind dropping any links in there that might answer those questions. Okay. Next question. Where do I find our UEI number? Is it the same as the EIN? And Paige, they don't need UEI for APS, is that right?
Yeah, we are not going to require that for project support. The federal government's process is really cumbersome. So we have saved you from that madness. But in the profile, you'll have to enter some information. So just put in 12 zeros or NA. NA, Deanna's saying NA. We have a winner. NA it is.
Great. And I am very happy for all of you that you do not have to walk through that UEI process. However, I'll just say, and this has nothing to do with the APS program, if you are thinking that you'll ever want to apply for federal funding, or in a couple of years, maybe your organization meets AOS criteria and that's the direction you want to go, it wouldn't hurt to just kind of take a peek at the federal granting system and familiarize yourself with what you would need to be able to do to obtain that number, because it has been a nightmare for many of our friends throughout the state. All right, next question. I'm wondering about the best type of activity our project would be, which is a series of arts and crafts events. I'm thinking arts instruction. That type of question is one that would be a great one to have a conversation with your regional arts partner on, where you can sort of one-on-one just walk through what your options are and get some more insight. I think that when it comes to the specifics of all of your projects or programs, again, regional arts partners are here. We can schedule 30, 45 an hour with you to go through some of those nuances. Let's see. So this is Dave just reminding folks that he's the regional arts partner in Region 1 and to feel free to reach out. His email was shared earlier, but it's also david@southshoreartsonline.org. whether or not we receive a grant, will we know how we scored in each category in order to improve these scores on future proposals? Absolutely. The panel process is open to the public, so you'll be able to watch your panel. It's conducted via Zoom now, so it's very accessible. And you'll also have access to the information on the scoring as well. How many grants will be awarded? So that number will be determined in APS by how many grants meet the scoring criteria for funding. Next question, would a series of movie showings to the public be qualified for this grant? Or does it have to be live artists such as visual or performing artists? No, movie showings, a series of movie showings available to the public does qualify for this funding. Again, as long as it is meeting the other criteria and parameters of the granting program. See. And I think that's all of our questions in the chat box. You all kept me on my toes for keeping up with the thread. Does anyone have any other questions that they want to ask right now? And I'll give it a second while you're thinking through that process of, do I actually want to say this out loud, or do I want to keep it to myself and then email later, which is a feeling I am very familiar with. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions. On behalf of all of the regional arts partners, we really are so glad that you are here today. I hope that this was helpful information. We're available not 24/7, but pretty close during granting periods. You're doing great work throughout the state. Oh, do we have a question? Or did I just hear an unmute for a moment?
Yes, from you.
I think we might just have had a momentary unmute there. You're doing great work throughout the state. We are eager to support that work, and really taking the step of applying for this funding is such a great way to serve your community and serve the artists in your area. So I do want to remind you all that there is page and accessibility webinar coming up. Is that right? I don't have the date in front of me.
Yeah, so February 14th, 4 p.m. Eastern time.
So okay. In the chat. There was one more question, Anne. From the question.
I'll just unmute to make it quicker. I was just asking, do you expect the application questions to change much between this year and then 2025? So that if my organization wants to use this year's questions to guide what project we might want to do next year, would that be a good guide? Probably.
I would say no.
Oh.
Yeah, we are looking to really evaluate the arts project support application. Really our goal would be to simplify it, find a more streamlined process to make it less cumbersome on the field. So we're going to be reevaluated project support over the course of this upcoming years. So I would say it's very likely it would not, but you never know. Things could change. I don't really envision that it'll change, but it's possible.
Thanks, Paige. All right, well, we did that in less than an hour. You all have 5 minutes that you had scheduled for this webinar back. Again, reach out with any questions. We appreciate you being here, and we're excited to see the projects and proposals that you all come up with. So thanks so much.